My name's Clint, and our exhibition, a bit of a background about the exhibition grant was about. So in 2014, we created an exhibition called Meeting the Challenge: Path Towards a Consumer Wearable Computer, where in 2001, Thad Starner wrote an article for IEEE Micro called The Challenges of Wearable Computing. And over the past 25 years, Thad has been collecting different wearable gadgets and storing them in his closet where no one could see them. So I had been pushing him to let me create an exhibit with these items. And so we worked together to create this exhibit, which is laid out to explain how over the past 20 years, we've met some of those challenges. So you'll see a huge battery that started wearable computing and then how the battery got smaller. Or you'll see when you walk through the exhibition, there's a podium on networking where you can see the strides we've made in networking and on-body networks with Bluetooth and stuff like that. So that's what the exhibition is about. And we first showed it at CHI in 2014, but to get it to CHI and also to allow it to travel, we designed the exhibition to flat pack. So the whole exhibition flat packs so that we can ship it, and we have been shipping it around the world. So I'll give you a quick tour. The first place it went after CHI was the factory opening in Berlin. The factory is a startup factory that Google helped sponsor, and we had over 800 people visit this over just one evening, all startup enthusiasts. So, and that's Thad, happy that we got it up in time. And we also invited Google Glass to come to this pop-up, and they gave demos of Glass, which was just starting to release in Germany at that time. So while it was in Germany, we got asked to display the exhibit at the CDU headquarters. The CDU is a political party in Germany, and Angela Merkel is the head of that. So this was displayed, so our exhibition was displayed in the office building of Angela Merkel's office. So when I was setting this up, I had a big box cutter in my hand that I was like cutting the boxes open to put everything up, and these guys like all stood around me, and I was like, what's going on? And then Angela Merkel walked through and stopped and read one of the podiums and walked, and I was like, if I had known, I would have talked to her. Yeah, I had a box. I would have set down the box cutter and then gone and talked to her. So this is what the exhibition looked like in that space. And as we travel with the exhibition, we also had speakers at most of the locations. So this is Greg Priest-Dorman. He's a wearable computing pioneer who started developing wearable computers to help him with his reading. He had a hard time reading, so he would use an e-reader or an audio reader and created a way to type with a quarter. So he's been making wearables for over 20 years, and he gave a really good tour of the exhibition and talked about the items that he has that are in the exhibition. And then we took a small subset of the exhibition and traveled to the World Economic Forum in China. Getting through Chinese security with the huge lead acid battery was quite fun, but we did. And so this is what the exhibition looked like there. We didn't use our flat pack podiums here because it was actually cheaper to have podiums made in China than to ship our flat pack podiums there. So. So after the CDU after the CDU exhibition, the Deutsches Museum asked if we could show it at their museum. The Deutsches Museum is like the Smithsonian of Germany. So we had a small room at the Deutsches Museum where our exhibition was up for about 2 months. And so this is Galileo's telescope. So that shows you the type of stuff that was around our pop-up exhibition. And then we brought it back here. So this kind of starts where the engagement grant helped us with finding some of the speakers, but also helped us provide video content for the exhibition. So during ISWIC in September of last year, I was able to interview a number of, ISWIC is the International Symposium on Wearable Computers, and I was able to interview a number of wearable experts to be able to add multimedia content to the exhibition. So that's Tom Martin back there in the back talking about power and heat. And this is the exhibition as was shown at the Georgia Tech College of Architecture Stubbins Gallery. And we had a number of events. I gave a tour, Thad gave a talk, and we had a number of classes actually walk through the exhibition as part of their course. So it was very useful in that regard. So the next place the exhibition is going is the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California from July through September. And there will be a huge College of Computing 25th year anniversary event there for West Coast alumni. So it should be great. There's going to be a Georgia Tech Day where Georgia Tech alumni can go to the museum for free on one day. And we are also going to have an educational event. I've been working with Jessica Pater in GTRI, who's a STEM researcher, and we've created a curriculum to go along with the exhibition that follows STEM-focused education. So we'll have an educational event. Another large portion of what we use the engagement grant for is a new ebook. So we've had professional photographs taken of all the objects in the exhibition, and we're incorporating the multimedia to create an ebook so that we can give away all this information for free on Apple and Android devices. These are what some of the pages look like. So special thanks to Maria Salawong. She's been helping, she's my undergraduate research assistant. She's been helping me put together the book and take some of the photos. Yoni Kaplan is a GRA who helped design and develop the flat pack system for the exhibition. Taverner Hall is Thad Starner's wife, who helped make sure all of the text was at the appropriate reading level for everyone to be able to partake. Greg Priest-Dorman, who helped give tours, and of course Thad Starner, who let me steal stuff from his basement and closet to put this together. And then, of course, it's sponsored by the GVU Center, IPaT, the Wearable Computing Center, and the School of Industrial Design. So really quickly, this is what some of the pages look like inside of the book. So we also have videos.
Talk about Moore's Law, where in a couple of years we'll get twice as much stuff. With batteries, it's just not going to happen. Like, we're within a factor of 2 or 3 is as good as you're going to get with batteries. So that's always going to be.
And then with many of the photographs, we have like hand pictures so you can see the scale and how it's used, and a number of different pictures. So I'm really excited about it. The ebook is going to be available for free starting July 1st with the opening of the exhibition at the Computer History Museum. So, any questions?
Do you know how many people have visited it while it's been sitting up in the IPaT space for the past few months? We've had it.
Yeah, so it's moved around campus quite a bit over the past 4 months, 5 months. Yeah, I would garner probably over, not just in IPaT, but over the places where it has been, at least 5,000 people have seen it, at least, because at Chi, we had probably 1,500, 800 at the factory where we were there the whole time, so we were able to count. And then it's been in a number of places over a couple of months. So probably 5,000 to 10,000 people have seen the exhibition. So my hope is that as we move to the Computer History Museum, where the Computer History Museum is a nice venue for it, because the people going there will be going there with an intent to learn about things like this, and then to have a takeaway where they can flip through and have the whole story is going to be great. I'm going to write an introduction for the book, and Thad Starner is going to write a new challenges section at the end. So, yeah.
Have you tracked, or have there been any media hits on this, any international press?
I have not tracked that. I know that there have been, because when it was at the CDU headquarters, we had an event with where they were talking about privacy. I can't tell you exactly what the media said because it was all in German, but there were a lot of questions. But we did walk them through the exhibition. I know that media came to Kai. Most of the media has been international media, so. Yeah.
Do you have an estimate of the person hours that you spent from planning to completion?
It's been a labor of love. I really enjoyed doing it. I would probably say it's really hard for me to estimate. I mean, I know that there's some days where like I spent the whole day on the phone with shipping people, and I've learned more about logistics than you can possibly imagine. So a lot of it has been logistics and stuff like that, but actually putting together the exhibit, building the exhibit, and working on the ebook, it's been at least a month or maybe 2 months of full-time work over the past 2 years. So.
Hi, I'm going to tell you about the Move Lab. And this was it could be seen as an outreach program, but it's also a research program that we developed with a seed grant. And the Move Lab was a STEAM community of learners that was developed in collaboration with iDrum Art Center. And it resulted in a performance made by middle school and high school girls that was a technologically enhanced dance performance. The project brought in real dancers, meaning professional dancers, from iDrum, as well as expert technologists from Georgia Tech. We also collaborated with Enchanted Closet, which is an outreach program for underserved girls, and they helped us do our recruiting and helped us with some of the management there. And it resulted in a performance in December. Most of the workshop was conducted over Thanksgiving with a couple other dates for rehearsal and the performance itself. So this project is a STEAM project, and that basically means it brings the A of arts into STEM. There's recently been a lot of interest in this, and there's also been some critique of it. Gary May recently published an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education, which at least one part of his critique I think was right on, which is that most of these projects use art as a hook. It's a way to get kids interested, and it's not really serving the arts at all. So we have decided to try and bring the arts in as a real partner in this project and give it the same sort of level of consideration as we do to the technology. So oftentimes people are using these events to teach tons of technology and then handing it over to the kids and asking them to make something like a scarf that lights up, right? Or a handbag that has some sort of sound sensor on it. And while they spend a lot of time teaching this type of content, they spend very little time talking about the conceptual side of what they're doing. So we invited artists in like Morgan Carlisle, who is actually going to be performing in Nick Cave's piece coming up next week at the Ponce City Market, who does a lot of experimental dance work. And she brought this kind of expertise to what we were doing and tried to pass that along to the girls as well. So we wanted to use art with technology for a few different reasons. One, we were interested in building a community of learners. And one of the things that you need to build a community of learners rather than a teacher-student relationship is to have different levels of expertise. We had technology experts, we had dance experts, and the girls brought in their own expertise because it was their sort of interest and values that drove the dance performance. So at all times, every member of the Move Lab was learning or teaching or sharing things at different levels of experience. And this is really a critical piece in creating a community of learners. We also want to use this opportunity to create boundary objects where different groups from different disciplines could come together to create artifacts where they attribute different meanings to the artifacts as well as kind of share their expertise in different ways in these artifacts. And this is super interesting work, and Kayla's pursuing that, but I'm not going to talk much about it today. What I really want to talk about is self-concepts. And self-concepts are different than identity. So as you guys probably all did too, when you're in middle school and high school, you're not necessarily going around with a formed identity. You're playing around with different self-concepts and putting those out into the world. So one day you may put out the self-concept that you're really good at technology, and the next day you might put out the concept that you're not, right? So we wanted to give the chance to the girls to try on a bunch of different self-concepts and see how we could scaffold that and encourage that for them to think positively about their engagement with the arts and with technology. So we did this through a design process. We really worked with the girls to help them kind of center the performance around what they were interested in rather than the adults dictating what the performance would be about. We also did this by providing them tools for technology, like all the other STEAM programs do, and also training on how to use these tools. But we also gave them a lot of tools for the arts. The professional dancers came in, conducted workshops with them, and we gave them materials and props that they could use in creating their costumes and their dance performance. We even had feathers, which I think is totally necessary. So after this 5-day workshop and then the 2 rehearsal and performance days, we decided to study these groups. And we did this with the 13 participants that were middle and high school girls, but we also considered the 4 tech leaders and the 4 dance leaders as part of our research, as part of our participants in the research. And we did our analysis based off of interviews, observations, surveys, and journals and artifacts that the girls produced. And we also looked at, and then we coded these with qualitative methods looking for emergent and anticipated themes. We did some reporting of the survey findings as well, but I'm not going to go over any of that today, just to let you know we did it. But so in developing self-concepts, we saw the girls developing self-concepts through their agency and pride. One of the ways they showed agency was that they really came up with the concepts for the dance. They owned it by selecting their own teams and identifying the tasks that need to be done. So this is one of their planners of all the things that needs to be done. But they also were really proud of some of their smaller accomplishments, particularly. So like making that costume. She was pretty proud of that and showing it off. Or otherwise being able to solder or solving a problem in the code. They were really proud of it and announced it quite loudly how proud they were of these things. So this is a way that they're projecting and putting out these self-concepts of themselves and getting a chance to play around with them. We also saw them developing some group identity with the other members of the Move Lab. And some of this was developed through the dance performance, or the dance activities particularly, because there was a lot of trust activities involved with dance, which involved touching in many cases, which involved working together. And we found that this actually shaped the group quickly to feel comfortable with each other. However, there was also some resistance to this group identity, and some of that, I think, was associated with the age differences or perceived technical ability. And it was interesting that most of the kind of conflict with group identity came over technical ability rather than dance ability, even though we had wide variations in both. They were also developing self-concepts by having an opportunity to express their value systems. So our design project really gave them a chance to bring the issues to the forefront. And there were things that they brought up which were both surprising to us and kind of anticipated. So they brought up a theme of bullying. That actually ended up being one that they pursued quite far. And I sort of anticipated that that would be an issue. But they also brought up issues of homelessness, environmental issues, and issues of inequalities in the schools. So by putting forth these different value systems, they were kind of getting a chance to test those out in the world too and see how other people reacted to them. And it was actually interesting to see how they were able to build off each other's ideals and sort of start to form some of these group identities that way too. So one of the problem, though, with self-concepts is that students are often coming in with preconceived ideas. And it was really interesting to us because that's harder to find when you're looking at their preconceived ideas about technology. It's harder to articulate or bring to the forefront because the girls don't want to look at us who are computer geeks and say, oh, I think that people who do computer stuff are geeks, right? They're at least savvy enough not to want to say that to us, right? But it was interesting when we were talking about dance, one of the concepts they were working on was this idea of inequality in the schools. And so they wanted to create a dance where all the kids at the good school were represented by ballet dancers, and all the kids at the bad school were represented by hip-hop dancers. I mean, that is just loaded with so many racial, socioeconomic issues that the girls didn't even know that they were bringing to the forefront. And we think that these kind of STEM activities are a chance to address those types of those types of notions and preconceived ideals. I think that we had a missed opportunity by not calling that out and talking about it. But we really didn't expect it to come up. So this is why it's a seed grant and not a final project. And so, also, one other thing about this that happened was we saw that they were often avoiding failure. So one of the ways that they protect their identity is by avoiding chances for them to fail publicly. And we saw this in small ways where they didn't want to try a new dance move or they didn't want to try and do some sort of technology activity. We were really able to work with them to overcome that in many cases. But we also saw them in a big way. This in a big way. And the irony of this is me admitting my failure here. So what happened was that a number of the girls did not show up for our final performance. So we were actually not able to perform all of the dances that the girls had created, and some of the other dances were short of someone. So they were performed very poorly because someone else had to fill in at the last minute, that kind of a thing. And it's kind of hard for us to know exactly why, but we have a notion, and I think that it's the right idea. In the last rehearsal, the day before, one of the girls' moms came to the rehearsal and she saw it. And she must have some performance background. She was super critical and very vocal about it, and all of the girls heard it. And the next day, the child of that mother didn't show up, and neither did her best friend. And the other person who didn't show up was someone who has some real dance experience and training. And we felt that after hearing this very critical remark, she probably was afraid that, she was going to lose face in front of these people by dancing in a bad dance. So I take this as both, I really wish we hadn't let that mom do that, but there's also a piece to this, which is that if you want to do art rather than craft, rather than DIY type of STEAM activities, then you really have to give them the time and space to make the art of a quality that the students can be proud of. Because you're setting the bar much higher, right? And we didn't really give them the time to make this a piece of art that they could be proud of. So next time, lesson learned. I am running a little bit out of time. So moving forward with the seed grant, I'm pretty happy about getting it because we have a huge line of research that's kind of grown out of this. And so I really want to thank GVU and IPaT for the funding. First of all, we've got a couple papers coming out, hopefully coming out, that we're submitting on this, following some different lines of this research. And also we have collaborated with the guys doing Ear Scratch, Brian McGarrico and Jason Freeman, on an NSF proposal to push these ideals of doing real STEAM work with real arts in the computer clubhouses. And so that should be a project that continues to move forward and probably wouldn't have been seeded without this money. And finally, I really want to thank two people in the room, Monet and Kayla, because without them, this project would not have happened. I'm talking, but they did most of the work. And also Morgan Carlisle, who's the other fabulous dancer there, because she also just put her heart and soul into this project as well. And I am open for questions. Go ahead.
I have a question on your failure avoidance. I actually have two questions. Your resistance to group identity. You talked about it was mostly based on tech skills, you thought. Was that a difference between the students that were more tech savvy and those that were more dance? Or was it among the tech-ear students different skills in that kind of set of the students? I guess others, I'm thinking you got some students that were more dance-oriented, some students that were more tech-oriented. Was resistance to group identity between those two groups or within the tech group?
No, they didn't like set themselves up as I'm a dancer person, I'm a tech person. They had these individual kind of self-concepts, like I'm much more techie than dance, but they didn't feel like a group. There wasn't fighting amongst the members of the group or conflict. The people who felt more, I don't know if they necessarily felt technically more competent, they just felt like they were older and smarter, and they would push the other kids aside. But when it came to dance, that wasn't the case. They were much more open to letting everybody do their own thing.
And then, kind of unrelated, but I'll do a follow-up question since I've got the floor. Your failure avoidance, you think the students may have left and not showed up for the final because of fear of failure.
Yeah.
But in pure science and engineering, you have to be prepared to fail. Failure is frequently happens and you learn from it and move on. But in art, a failed public performance is different than a failed research project in the lab.
Well, I would equate it to a failed bridge. You really don't want to have that happen in engineering.
Yeah.
You can have a failure in your rehearsal, and that's okay, but you don't want your public performance to fail. In the same way, you can have a failure in your model of your bridge, but you really can't with the real thing.
So do you think the students get that concept? Because I would be worried a negative outcome could be teaching them to not be risky and try things because they might fail in public performance. Whereas I think as a scientist, you have to be prepared to try risky things, knowing they might fail because they might not.
Yeah, I think in the arts, failing is accepted and common. It's a practice. Right? So anything that is a practice means that you're practicing and failing and trying. And I think what we're saying is that they were willing to go through the whole workshop and have all those kinds of experiences, but when it came down to the final performance, they were afraid of looking dumb, right, or bad. It is probably true that we didn't have them prepared enough to do a public performance at a real venue, right? Because it was at iDrum. It may have been better if it was a more casual sort of feeling, right? Any other questions?
What was the relationship between the girls or among the girls prior to the start of this?
So there was a few that came in with either a sibling or a best friend, but for the most part, they didn't know each other, right? Yeah. They may have met like once at another activity that Enchanted Closet was holding, but they weren't friends, except for they came in pairs quite frequently.
This is great. Thanks, Betsy.
All right, so thank you all for coming today, and I'm really excited to tell you about an ongoing project on thinking about how we can use motion-based games to improve collaboration and peer interaction in kids with autism. And for those of you who have heard a little bit about autism, it may come as no surprise that these individuals struggle with peer relationships and interactions sort of across the spectrum. And so supporting, given the importance that peer interactions play in kind of social learning throughout the lifetime, it's really important to support these skills in kids with autism. So this is sort of the sort of broader background against which this project is taking place. Before I move on, I want to kind of acknowledge my really wonderful collaborators. This was really, I guess that's what GVU Sea Grants are great for, is they sort of bring a wide group of people together. So the Brian Margerko was sort of the co-PI on the project. IPaT is an MS student who's been sort of the heart and soul of this project for maybe 2 years now. We were very fortunate to work very closely with the Lionheart School in Alpharetta, which is a school, special sort of needs school for kids with autism, and we worked very closely with 2 teachers at that school across this project. And then we had these 2 wonderful undergraduate students who worked with IPaT to actually develop kind of the game that I'll be telling you about. So just a little bit of background about this project. About a year and a half, 2 years ago, IPaT and I went to the Lionheart School. We brought a Connect, and we had mocked up, she had mocked up what I thought were these kind of really lame-looking little activities. So we had a little background you could pull up, and you could sort of take the students and represent them on the screen as a little avatar, like a little skeleton, or you could put them up in their sort of live mode. The kids could kind of just do whatever they wanted. And what was really interesting is that the students really, really resonated with this. They got so excited. They really made the connection between kind of their own body and movements and what they were seeing on the screen. And so they were sort of making all these movements. We even saw evidence of kids sort of running over to grab a peer and bring them over to see, like, if we do things together, will we see our skeletons do things on the screen? So we sort of realized we were onto something. And over the course of the next 7, 8, 9 months, we actually did a number of sort of kind of a long-term deployment in some of these activities in the classrooms at Lionheart, and really saw both through sort of qualitative analysis of videos and quantitative sort of looking at what was happening, that we were getting a lot of positive affect and engagement from the kids, that actually some of the motor coordination and planning issues that these kids have seemed to be a little bit ameliorated. They would do things in the context of gameplay that they wouldn't do, like in their, physical therapy, for example. And most interestingly, we kept seeing these very kind of nascent peer interactions that were kind of happening around gameplay. So this is really where the sort of GVU SEGRET came in, because I became interested in thinking about, okay, well, these were sort of incidental things that we noted. What would it mean for us to think about how do we actually design one of these Kinect-based, motion-based games to really sort of explicitly try to pull for this sort of collaboration and joint action? And so we've really kind of, there's sort of two questions embedded in this larger question. One is, what are the actual kind of game mechanisms that you could think about creating that might pull for collaborative play? And so in working closely with the teachers, we are exploring things like, well, what about sort of optional versus enforced kind of collaborative activities? So we have this very simple game in which the two players have a little bucket and they can catch bees and butterflies and planets, whatever. And then there are these special joint catch objects where both partners have to bring their bucket together to catch that object. So that's so you could think of, they can sort of choose to do that, or they can choose to continue to catch their own individual object. But we also thought about enforcing collaboration. So at some point the bucket might break and the gameplay can't proceed unless the two players kind of fix their bucket. So that's sort of one dimension. Then another dimension we thought about is how might you actually prompt and encourage these sort of joint activities. So for example, if the students don't go after the joint catch object, might it sort of glow and provide some visual auditory feedback to sort of encourage the students to catch it? And then we also thought about, well, what about different kinds of feedback mechanisms and rewards within the game? So for example, if the students successfully catch the object, might it, something cool visual could happen, and these kids really love that sort of audio-visual feedback. Or maybe if you do it, you get more points. You get more points for catching the joint objects than if you just caught your own. So those are sort of the mechanisms within the game that you could think about sort of bringing about and scaffolding some of these collaborative actions. But for me, the more interesting question really is, then in that context, do you see any evidence of sort of initiations and responses between the peers as they're playing the game? So we're currently sort of in the midst of data collection. So IPaT is not here because she's at Lionheart recording some of the video sessions. But I wanted to show you just a few videos that I think from very early gameplay that are capturing some of these initiations and responses that are sort of happening, and that we will be sort of capturing more formally through our video analysis. So in this first example, you will actually see what a big role your peer, sort of a more advanced peer play partner can play in sort of bringing about interaction.
Oh, I can't reach that star. Can I get that star? And can you get that star for me because I'm left-handed? Bend down to catch it. There we go. Now I'm far enough to catch that star. Do it again. Move your right. Got it. Good job, bud.
Right, so this is really nice, and I sort of love to see that sort of, the one student kind of encouraging the other. And actually, if he hadn't been doing that, the other student would have kind of wandered off. In this example, what I really love is you'll see, when I talk about students really sort of being engaged and sort of excited about gameplay, you'll see that, and you'll see sort of the sense of accomplishment that they're sharing over being able to do one of these joint catches.
If you go to the rocket. Oh, we got it again! Let's get it again! Let's go again, Ian! Oh, yes! Do it again! Hurry up, you still got 46 seconds! Not 44! Keep catching!
You also probably noticed that the teachers are actually playing a pretty big role early on and kind of scaffolding some of these interactions. And that's something we had seen before, and I think I'm really sort of interested in documenting, because it's not just about the game. It's kind of, there's this larger social context, as you see, that's kind of happening. And in the last video, I really like this video because I wanted you to show that this isn't just about children who are very verbal. So you will see the boy in the green shirt. He doesn't speak, but boy, is he trying to get his peer play partner to catch that joint object with him. And you'll see him gesturing and vocalizing, and eventually the teacher kind of steps in.
What is it, Ryan? Tori, do you want to help Ryan get the rocket? Yeah. You need to put your bucket with Ryan's bucket so you can get the rocket together. I tried. Yeah. Yeah, there, you got it. You get 10 extra points.
Okay. So as I mentioned, these are the kinds of more detailed analyses that we were going to do to sort of understand what's happening, what kind of initiations and responses are happening across these interactions. So as I mentioned, we kind of have this ongoing evaluation at the school. So there are 3 classrooms that are participating, and what's nice is that these classrooms kind of span the range from children that have a little more difficulty with communication interaction all the way up through children who kind of, it's more about conversations, and we've seen them sort of negotiating around who has more points. And so we have about 16 students participating, and IPaT is going to Lionheart School twice a week for a few hours because she wants to be there. She wants to, we want to make sure that we kind of capture these interactions, the gameplay interactions that are happening. And the way we've kind of set up our studies, the game is actually being played in multiple conditions. So you can play it with and without those prompts that I mentioned, and then either with getting the sort of fireworks when you catch an object together or getting more points. And what we want to be able to look at is when you look at the sort of success of, for example, getting these collaborative joint catches happening, how does that vary across these conditions? Do certain things matter more or less for certain kids? And also when we begin to look at some of the behaviors that are happening around the interaction, the sort of peer initiations and responses, are those also in varying ways tied to these various kind of conditions? And just to kind of give you a little bit of a snapshot of what we're seeing so far, it's sort of, we don't have enough data really to start to kind of formally analyze, are we getting more joint catches with or without prompts? But we are seeing is actually a little bit of these practice effects. So it's, you can't just go into one of these schools with one of these games, plop these kids in front of them and be like, go play, right? So we're seeing that, this rate of joint catches per minute of play is sort of right now steadily increasing as the kids are kind of getting used to the game, and you saw the teachers sort of playing a role and kind of helping them learn it. And so we're sort of, hoping that this sort of stabilizes and we will have sort of a longer period of gameplay where we can kind of more formally explore some of these conditions that I mentioned earlier. So that's that. Thank you very much for your time, and I am open for questions. And it would have been better with feathers, I think, but next time.
So it might be too early, but are there any correlations, or are you planning on seeing if there are any correlations to how they learn from interacting with the game and translate it to real life interactions?
So that's always kind of the million-dollar question. It's really, really difficult to do because this is sort of although the school does do a lot of different kind of non-traditional academic activities, so I think that's always an open question. We did notice in our previous exploration, when we were in the classroom longer, what the teachers reported is very often students that had been kind of paired off during the gameplay, even after the game was played off, they would kind of linger around and still sort of do things together. So I think that that may come out in some of the conversations with teachers and getting at that. But I think documenting it more formally may be difficult unless we sort of set up some play interactions, and that might be a little bit artificial. But I think it's always the question for these technologies. And in my mind, there's sort of, there's a lot of work in autism and technology where people sort of just plop the kid in front of a game and they say, okay, learn social skills, right? So I thought, okay, let's take it one step further and say, well, at least within the context of the game, can we get some social stuff that isn't just in the game, it's actually in the space between the students? And then the next step I really think is what you're getting at, which is, okay, does that actually over time spill over onto other interactions sort of outside of the gameplay? And I think that would be really cool as sort of, the next step following on this work. Yeah, absolutely. Yes?
So I just had a question about, out of curiosity, how does this kind of gameplay and interaction compare to the gameplay that they do that doesn't use the connector technology?
So I wish IPaT was here because she has spent so much time at the school. I mean, I think there's been lots of work. So you're talking about just activities with objects. I mean, this actually came up in our paper review because people were asking, well, how much is this about this whole body and body thing, and what if you just gave them some toys and would they do it? And they don't, right? They actually, that's the whole issue, is that they're in the classrooms with their peers. They do have periods of time that are sort of unstructured, and you're not seeing kind of these kinds of little, and I'm not claiming that we're gonna like cure these kids of their autism, but what's really interesting is I think that you're getting a certain level of engagement and positive affect because these games are so much fun. There's this embodied nature to these interactions. You're sort of moving your bodies, and so we may be kind of essentially sort of just riding the coattails of that kind of motivation, that it creates this little context where actually some of these nascent, back and forths can take place. So I have this hypothesis that it is something about the kind of embodied nature of this interaction that's very different than the other kinds of activities where it's like, well, just go play, with these toys.
Maybe one more very quick question while Lucy and Kim get set up. Nothing else?
Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Lauren and I'm a researcher in the School of Public Policy, and I'm here with my teammate Brighton. And we came together on a team including Dr. Kim Iset, Dr. Naseem Jafari Naimi, Benji Sun, and Gwen Hughes. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a communication tool which would take a lot of inaccessible data in the literature about early intervention in autism and transform that into an accessible visual argument that policymakers can use to make informed decisions about policy regarding autism. So one of the reasons why autism is a pressing policy issue is that over the last decade, prevalence rates have increased 120%. Right now, it's 1 in 64 children are affected in Georgia. And so not only is autism a pressing policy issue, but using a website to get to policymakers is also really important. One reason is that policymakers don't have a lot of time. On average, they have less than 15 minutes a day to gather enough information to make policy decisions that impact our lives. Secondly, empirical evidence, the time it takes from empirical evidence to get to practice is 10 years. So that's
I think this is a really cool project. People have talked over and over and over what a gap there is between sort of what the research community knows about, treatment, for example, and what kind of filter home broadly. I guess the key thing underlying all this, though, is this sort of notion of what is quality. So I'm curious about that quality stat, and how you approach that, right? Because in intervention, there are sort of formal guidelines where you're supposed to randomized controlled trials are better than a bunch of skill case study designs. But how did you weigh all these factors as you were going through that kind of quality stat?
So actually, a researcher who worked on the project before me created an access form that based the quality assessments on Cochrane reviews. And so I used those forms that had their own little analytics in them to actually determine whether something was low quality, medium quality, or high quality. And things like what type of study was it? Was it a randomized control trial? Were the researchers who were collecting the data, did they know, were they blind to what the treatment group was? That sort of thing. And so I could probably talk to you a little bit more in depth afterwards. But so we base a lot of that on the Cochrane review, though.
So you guys seem to have a lot of data in there. I have two questions. One, how dynamic is that type of data? Like, especially for costs of things. Like, do you anticipate that this, you would have to assign somebody to continuously be updating this, on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis? And then second question, I see that this is broken down for Georgia specifically. How relevant is the data you guys have in there to other states?
That's a good question. So in terms of being able to update the website, we kept that in mind, that the data would change, and that over the years, new research would come out, and so we did want it to be dynamic, and we did want it to be updated. Maybe Brighton can speak to specifics there.
So we do have the backend technology in place to be dynamic about the data, but not on a dynamic in a day-to-day basis. But because even with the literature that we collected, some of these data we were only able to find for 3 years back. So we do not think that this data is going to be dynamic, that you would expect to update it a monthly basis, but it's only when the research papers and the numbers come out that you'd be good. But yes, it's in place.
And what was your second question?
Georgia.
Between states.
So the cost data and the outcome data are completely applicable to other states. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the 15 minutes a couple of times. Have you made plans to figure out whether the 15 minutes is really a reality, given the presentation of your web page and all the potential information, just to be able to back that statement up about 15 minutes?
So the 15 minutes, that it would take less than 15 minutes to go through this? No, we haven't. We have not been.
That's the next step. So we're looking at heuristic valuations to make sure that this is accessible within the 15 minutes, and we have the take-home points that are in memory when you leave this artifact after. We also think that this could be an artifact that they could take to a meeting and run the whiz and say, hey, look at this, and could be used as an artifact for them to present to the rest of the board.
Or user testing of the pledge staffers.
Let's thank all of our presenters again. Just one final comment for folks in the GVU and IPaT communities. The next call for C grants will be going out probably the next week or two, I would guess. So keep an eye out for that.